Welcome back. You're watching Trade of the Week, and for today's segment, I'm joined by Unum Capital's Loyiso Mpeta for a technical analysis recap, on Capitec, Dischem, Kumba Iron Ore, Mr. Price and Quilter. Thank you so much for your time, Loyiso. So a technical recap on some of them, but also some of them you haven't really covered, and actually one of those is Capitec. Capitec has been quite an interesting one because it's widely debated on whether its valuation is too bloated, considering the earnings that it has come out with lately. Of course, you know that this is a company that grew rapidly in the initial stages of operations. And of course, there was a point when investors were like, you know what, actually, this looks a little bit expensive for what it is producing right now. Of course, we also know that they're not isolated from the macroeconomic challenges that the country and particularly its customer base is faced with. So take us through what you are seeing on the Capitec front, because it seems like there might be a little bit of a change in sentiment there. Yeah, no, I think there is. And again, just in terms of the valuations, the rapid growth and everything, that's actually why, if you remember when we did the whole banking sector special, I deliberately left out Capitec because its numbers, performance was so outrageous relative to the others that it just didn't make sense to compare it with them. So just going back a bit into time, actually not too far back, in April last year, we see Capitec made an all-time high, and from that day, it's had a very significant correction, down about 45% from that all-time high. But from this May 2023 low, I'm starting to see that it could be at, say, mid-stages of a significant trend reversal. And what I like about this chart of Capitec is we had this very, very strong upper resistant trend line, which the share price has now clearly broken. So that is the first sign that a reversal or a trend reversal is already underway. And again, looking at it from a wave perspective, when I apply my wave count, I'm looking at this as a textbook wave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is a bullish sequence. So whenever I see a stock that's trading in the fifth wave, I always say it can continue to run up, but I'm always cautious when a stock is in its fifth wave, as then I start to look at a imminent correction in three waves. So I think as long as Capitec remains above this 1,328 level, we can remain bullish from a purely technical perspective. Though I must say, from a valuation perspective, we can see that investing.com has got it currently as fairly valued. So from a valuations perspective, fairly valued, but technically, I think we are in the early phases or early stages of a trend reversal. Again, if the fundamentals are not as supportive, I don't get too much conviction from a fundamental perspective, but the technical picture does at least look bullish from that May 2023 low. Well, I mean, just on fundamentals, because I think there was a point when the share price was under pressure where I think investors were kind of wondering, okay, they've grown this much. Where is the next growth phase going to come from? And I'm maybe wondering if maybe investors are starting to think, okay, there's maybe more room, more runway for growth for this company. And also maybe looking at credit impairments, because I mean, that is the first thing that investors put laser focus on with banks in this kind of environment, where they may be thinking, actually, the credit impairments are not so bad after all. What do you think markets are kind of banking on here fundamentally? Well, you know, again, going back to the banking sector special that we did, and I always emphasized how complex the fundamentals relating to banking are. So if you really want to take a deep dive into banking, I wouldn't call myself a specialist in that sector. I think there are some very, very good banking sector analysts in the country that really cover the banking stocks well. So I won't put my head on the line on this one and say anything specific. So I'll stay clear on that one. Okay, I mean, listen, I get the complexity of it, because it's also a double-edged sword, because, for example, as much as they have even benefited now from the high interest rates, but it also goes the other way, where because of these high interest rates, the customers are really struggling to pay off their loans.
No, that's true.
Yeah, well, talking about growth, Dischem also one company that has grown a lot over the past few years. At some point, they were making so many acquisitions and growing so much that it seemed like such an exciting stock compared to its competitor Clicks, that is basically seen as your steady Eddie. So just talk to us about what you're seeing there on the technical picture for Dischem.
Yeah, so on that, I mean, and I always say to people, one of the worst investment strategies I've ever heard is invest in the stock where you do your shopping or something like that.
Oh.
And I always say to people, I do more shopping at Dischem than I do at Clicks. Yeah. But Clicks has always been the better stock. And when you look at Dischem going back to late 2016 when it was listed, you can see how wild its share price has been. It hasn't really been a significantly trending stock. It's always wild swings between peaks and troughs. So if we look at it now just from this July 2020 low, it had a very, very strong run up to 39.15, and then we had this very strong correction. And this strong correction really was characterized firstly by this rounding top topping formation, and then we had this very, very strong sequence of lower lows and lower highs. Though I must say, again, we're dealing with trend analysis again here. And we can see we had this lower high, lower low, and then from this point here, the stock started making higher lows, and then we've had this recent rally, which also was boosted by the latest results which came out, and we see that the stock has now made a higher high relative to the previous lower high. So from a trend perspective, the question is this now the official trend reversal? So whenever you have this break in lower highs, lower low sequence, it's never a guarantee that the trend is changing, but at least we can say the stock has now bucked the trend, and whether or not this is going to be a significant reversal is really anyone's guess. But at least from a conviction perspective, I'm more confident that at this juncture, there's more upside potential than there is downside potential. So looking at it from a wave perspective, I'm currently looking at this as a wave 1, wave 2, and this is the early stages of a third wave. But I do have a line in the sand where I will say this outlook is invalidated if the share price were to break below this low here at about 21.50. So looking at it from a valuation perspective as well, also fairly valued, coming in with a price target of 33.81, which is not too far off from where it is now currently. So I must say the latest results were very, very positive. And looking at the technical picture, it does look as if we are in the early stages of a trend reversal and going back into some bullishness.
Well, talking about reversal, there seems to be some reversal in the iron ore market as well. I actually spoke to two analysts earlier on last week, and someone was asking, you know, if they should go for Thungela and Exxaro, and actually both analysts said Exxaro because of its iron ore composition as well. Coal is a little bit tricky at this point. Yeah. So I'm guessing with Kumba Iron Ore, because it's purely an iron ore play, then there is some sort of bullish sentiment coming through. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, that is exactly what I'm seeing in Kumba. And interestingly enough, the last time we covered it was very early last year, and I just emphasized this very, very strong correlation between Kumba in orange and iron ore futures in blue. And back then, the stock had just made an all-time high, and I actually had two operative wave counts back then. So I had the first scenario where the first sell-off was only for wave E and for wave A, and I was forecasting a rally for wave B and then one more sell-off for wave C, or alternatively, this entire move down was a completed ABC. And as time has shown, it actually was the first scenario. So what we had was this all-time high back in August of 2021, a very strong sell-off for wave A, strong pullback for wave B, but another strong sell-off for wave C, giving us a classic zigzag pattern. And what I'm seeing now is a textbook wave 1, 2, and we seem to be in the early stages of wave 3. So I'm very bullish on Kumba Iron Ore. But again, from a valuation perspective, coming in as fairly valued to overvalued. So our technicals and fundamentals are not aligning today.
Yeah. Okay.
But again, just to emphasize again that very, very strong correlation between Kumba Iron Ore as well as iron ore futures. We can see more often than not how strong this correlation is. And this upper boundary line is the maximum correlation coefficient of 1. And you can see how strong this relationship is more often than not. And we can see now we are at a juncture where there was a bit of a disconnect, and it seems that that correlation is now starting to be in sync again, which bodes well for the stock now that we see the iron ore futures are also starting to turn around. So I think looking at the technical picture, I am a bit bullish on Kumba Iron Ore.
Yeah, and also boding well for Anglo American, the parent, because it had seemed that for recently platinum, the PGMs, and also iron ore were really the segments that were putting the parent under pressure.
Yeah.
So here's hoping that that will also be boosting Anglo American there. Let's go to retailer Mr. Price. So they came out with numbers last week. Revenue up more than 20%, which is really great in this kind of environment. But then they did say that their bottom line did reduce, of course, talking about a number of challenges, including costs, promotional activity, and also the consumer that is under pressure where they've had to tighten their credit lending criteria. But we did see investors flocking into the stock there. And I'm wondering if maybe also now that we've had the central banks holding interest rates where analysts are starting to kind of forecast rate cuts, that maybe this could be, investors are seeing this as the perfect time to go into these stocks?
Yeah, so I think the investors flocking in part is quite debatable. I think there are a few of us who were actually looking at the report and we're looking at the price reaction and we're wondering if does it really tell the full picture. And again, one has to consider the impact of algorithmic trading as well when news releases come out, and the fact that the stock hasn't really had a strong follow-up from. So a bit, so yeah, let's take a look at it. So going back to when we last covered Mr. Price, which was, when was this, around September last year, I went back to that low in March 2020, and I said that this advance was in 5 waves. And at that stage, I had seen this as a potential zigzag and complete, and I did give a buy signal, but emphasizing that if the stock price breaks below 164, then the outlook is invalidated. So that outlook was invalidated, and what we did see in Mr. Price was a prolonged sell-off. And again, using the same logic we used with Dischem, this bad trend, very, very clear characteristic of lower lows as well as lower highs. But from this low, we can see that price made a new higher high relative to the prior lower high, and also made a higher low relative to this lower low, and also made now a new higher high after the release of the results last week. So again, is this the backing of the downtrend? It's still very early stages, but looking at the trend analysis from this perspective, it does give some confidence that we could be in the early stages of a reversal. What I'm also seeing is a classic inverse head and shoulders. What we have here is the left shoulder, the head, the right shoulder. Now this is the inverse because it's a head and shoulders pattern, but it's at the bottom of a bear trend. So it's the opposite of a head and shoulders, which is a bearish. So this one is a bullish one. So taking that into perspective as well adds more conviction that we could potentially be in the early stages of a reversal. But again, very significant. Below 123.25, then that invalidates the outlook. And again, this is the beauty of the wave principle, is that you have a very, very objective price level where you know your analysis and your forecast is wrong. So you don't have to hold on for dear life not knowing where a bottom is. And again, looking at it from a fundamental perspective, fairly valued at current levels. So again, today, not much of a positive relationship between valuations and the technical picture. So again, one has to weigh what's more significant to you. Is it the fundamental outlook or is it the technical outlook? Sometimes they talk together, sometimes they contradict each other. So again, this is the nature of the game.
All right. Well, lastly, let's get on to Quilter. Of course, we know also the asset managers have are dependent on the market performance, which hasn't been great. Quilter, what are you looking at there? Of course, the was unbundled from Old Mutual a few years ago, exposed to the UK market.
Yeah, honestly, Quilter has never been a company that I've looked at. Since its listing, the share price performance has never been attractive to me. So before I even take any interest in a stock, looking at fundamentals, the technical picture tells me whether should I even look at it or not.
It looks so interesting.
This looks ugly. This is what you call an ugly share price. So, but again, I saw some technical patterns which were quite interesting. So looking at the share price performance since listing, it had this all-time high at 34.87, had this pullback for wave A, a three-wave rally for wave B, and I looked at this sell-off as an ending diagonal for wave C, which then bottomed in late 2022 at 1661. And we can see that since this bottom, the share price hasn't really done much. It's just been consolidating, moving sideways. But I'm looking at price action recently, and it looks like it wants to start accelerating to the upside, and it's breaking out of this consolidation zone here. So from a purely technical perspective, it's intriguing enough to then want to look deep into the fundamentals to understand what's really going on. But from a technical perspective, it does look like a bottom is in at 1661, but I don't have it as a high conviction trade. But I think from a purely technical perspective, it's worth looking into.
All right. Well, as we wrap up the conversation, let's go into our educational segment, and we're talking about trend analysis today.
Yeah, so I think just as we've seen with so many of these stocks going through significant bear trends, the question is always, how does one build conviction in a bearish market that the bear is actually now over and done with? So from a technical perspective, we use various methods. We can use technical indicators, more specifically momentum indicators, looking for divergences in price and the indicator, which is then an early indication of a potential trend reversal. We always say momentum precedes price, meaning any change in momentum happens before price actually changes direction. And also the significance of what I was using with Dischem and Mr. Price, that sequence of higher highs and higher lows. So we always say in a bear market is characterized by a sequence of lower lows as well as lower highs, but a bullish market is characterized by a sequence of higher lows as well as higher highs. So whenever you start to see that reversal in that sequence, that sort of gives conviction or sentiment that there's a reversal. So again, it's not a perfect science. I mean, technical analysis is actually more of a combination of art and science, but when you do see these signals, that's where you can start getting a bit of conviction as well as more positive sentiment into the stock. So that's how we just use those just to help us in terms of breaking down those trends.
All right. Well, thank you very much for making us smarter today, Loyiso. Really, really appreciate it. That was Unum Capital's Loyiso Mpeta with this week's Trade of the Week. And that's all from the Business Lunch team today. Nolutando is back tomorrow, same time, same place. I'm back with the close at 5:30 p.m. this evening. But until then, stay tuned for lots more coming up right here on Business Day TV.